Armed during my childhood, every year my family would have a tradition where we'd all go up to northern Michigan for a weekend. In October, our Uncle Jim used to own a 4-acre property up there. The house on the property could fit a lot of people with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. 2 bedrooms were set up for my cousins and my siblings. So my brother and sister in one room, and our 4 cousins in another room. The other rooms were for all of our parents. My Uncle Jim has always been a big hunter and fisherman. He'd go on camping trips specifically for hunting all around the country. My dad has gone camping with him a few times, even though he's an animal lover and would never harm a fly. Part of the 4 acres that my uncle owned was a big chunk of forest. He marked a L of trees with red paint to mark the property line beyond. That was just forest owned by the county. I don't know, the nearest house in that direction was probably miles away. Me, my brother Adam, and my cousins Jake and Joe all came up with an idea at lunch when our dads were talking about hunting. We wanted to go camping in the woods that night. Our dads were on board with it. They were definitely already kind of drunk, so more likely to say yes to stuff. Our moms weren't as on board, but they didn't directly say no. So my dad and Uncle Jim took the 4 of us into the woods with a tent. My girl cousins and sister were not involved in this. It was just us boys. They led us into the woods, and when Joey, the youngest of us, started complaining that it's too far, they started laughing. That's how our dads are when they're together, especially when they drink. They loved messing with us as kids. Speaking of ages, I'm oldest at the time. I was around 13. Adam and Jake were around 10, and Joe was around 9. We went beyond the property line, as there was this small clearing in the woods with a bunch of soft green, mossy-looking stuff that my uncle referred to as deer beds, and pretty sure he said it was perfect for a campsite, and that he's used it before. My dad and Uncle Jim kind of gave us a half-drunk lesson on setting up a tent. They made us help out, so that it wasn't just them doing all the work. It was a really big tent. Big enough for 4 people, especially kids. Once it was set up, we put our sleeping bags inside. We did this during the day because obviously it was infinitely easier than doing it at night, after all of that. We went back to the house and played games outside until dinner time at dinner. Our moms again expressed that they weren't fans of this idea that we were too young to be out in the woods alone. Our dads insisted that we'd be fine. And I remember my dad making a joke that we'd be close enough for them to hear our screams if something were to go wrong. It wasn't until later on that our dads led us back into the woods. To the tent, we all had flashlights and extra blankets. Since it was cold at night, I also brought a deck of Uno cards for us to play when we all got situated in the tent. My dad and Uncle Jim left back to the house. We were suddenly alone in the woods. Honestly, we weren't as close to the house as you think we were, deep enough into the woods where you couldn't see any light from the house. We started playing Uno for a while. I say half an hour at least. Playing Uno is actually a really good time killer. It passes the time really well. Well, the tent was lit up by our flashlights arranged in a circle. All was fun and swell, until we heard a scream. In the distance, it sounded like a girl scream. We all went silent and looked at one another with the same faces. I then remembered that foxes scream sound like the scream of a woman. So I told everyone that I saw how freaked out Joe was especially, but my statement calmed everyone down. We continued to play Uno. I actually won like every single round at that point. No one had mentioned the scream again. It was most likely out of all of our minds, but it happened again, and much louder and closer. This time, it sounded a lot more human. We all went silent again this time. Even I was freaked out. Joe looked like he was gonna cry. I told everyone to turn their flashlights off. We crawled to our respective sleeping bags and sat in the darkness. None of us had the courage to run out into the woods back to the house. It's that fear of running and being chased and just catching the attention of whatever was out there with the sound of our footsteps, somehow hiding inside of a cloth tent, felt like the safer option. So we waited and waited in silence. We still whispered amongst each other, wondering if it could still be a fox. I was truthful and said I don't know. Hopefully I don't know who heard it first, but we all sprung up and looked at one another again when we heard very fast footsteps crunching the leaves approaching the tent. Then they stopped, and there was an ear-piercing, gut-wrenching scream that sounded like a girl or woman's scream. It was right outside the tent, and the tent started shaking violently. All of us started screaming. Jake and Jim were screaming in fear, while my brother and I were screaming stuff like, "Get out of the tent." I unzipped the door to the tent, and one by one we all ran into the woods with our flashlights on. The only reason we could see anything that run back to the house was the most on-edge moment of my life, like a life or death kind of feeling. We made it to the property, screaming the whole way, and our entire family was already outside in response to it all. 4 of us made it back safely. We explained the screams and the tent shaking, and they were all shocked and horrified, based on their reactions. Then I noticed our cousins, Jamie and Christina and my sister, weren't outside. I called out my dad and uncle, accusing them of sending one of the girls to scare us. But when he showed us that the girls were already in bed, that's when it was clear someone we didn't know was out in the woods. Our dads went out to the woods with a couple of rifles and returned after a while, having found nobody. The next day, we all helped in bringing the tent and other stuff back to the house. Obviously, you can guess that that was a one-and-done thing. We never camped out in those woods again. Hell, we didn't even play outside after dark anymore. What kid would after such an experience? My guess is as good as anybody's as to who was outside of our tent and why they were doing what they